How many people can you name from Central America? And the educators, even in schools with large numbers of Central American students, other than the educators here, but other educators will often say, oh yes, I can name somebody, and they'll say Cesar Chavez. We'll go, yes, Latino, but not from Central America. And so we came up with this activity where everybody gets a bio. You put on your name tag, and I think most people have one, so go ahead and put on your name tag. And they read the bio that's behind, and if you don't have one, I think Andy and, not sure if Andy and Pam have any yet. You read your bio, and then normally, we won't do this here because people are ordering food. Normally, you then go around the room and interview each other with a set of questions. And you'll see that you have people from Central America, but also from the United States who've played a role in Central America. And literally within about 15 minutes, you can ask the question again, how many people can you name from Central America? And everybody raises their hand. They can name people. They know about the U.S. role. And they then have a lot of curiosity in learning more about the people they just read about. So we're going to ask you at your seats just to take a few minutes to read your role and then talk to the person next to you. Don't have them read your role. Talk to them about who you are and what your connection is to Central America. And then we'll come back in about 5 minutes. Thank you. Yeah, so you're starting here, welcome, right? Yeah. And then on the next page, yeah, we should have been on this.
So we're going to start. All right, thank you. So I wanted to welcome everyone to the first in a series of events hosted by Teaching for Change and Busboys and Poets as part of, as part of Teaching for Change's 35th anniversary celebration this year. Okay. So I want to formally welcome everyone here. My name is Nancy Raquel Mirabal. I'm Associate Professor in American Studies and the Director of the U.S. Latino Studies Program at the University of Maryland, College Park. And a very proud Teaching for Change board member. So, yay, is my board of change? Okay, so we'd like to know about you. Raise your hands if you are a teacher. Welcome, welcome. If you are a student, maybe a grad student. If you are from Central America and or with family from the region, how many folks here for, all right, that's beautiful. And how about if you're someone who enjoys reading books? Yay! So this is the event for you. So this event is during Latina Heritage Month and advance of our 6th annual Teach Central America Week. Teaching for Change Deputy Director Keisha Saran and Executive Director Deborah Menkart will share briefly about the campaign, and then we'll hear from our authors. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Hi, everyone. I'm Keisha Saran. I'm the Deputy Director of Teaching for Change, and we're excited to be here back in fellowship with Busboys and Poets, so thank you so much for all joining us. I'm going to share a little bit about the Teach Central America campaign and the work that we do to continue to amplify the region and teach young people and adults, right, about the history, the culture, and the present, right, of Central America. So you'll see a couple of slides on the screen. Don't worry about it. We have postcards and flyers and other things as well, but I'll just share a little bit about the work that we're doing. So we have a couple of postcards, well, not a couple, we have some postcards with that you can get at our table right here, but just sharing a little bit about, one, art from Central America, and two, what is the Central America program? So we know that more than 7 million Central Americans reside in the United States. We also know that there's a scarcity of resources when it comes to what teachers know about the region, and we also know that there are many teachers, like some of you, both in the room and online, that are teaching outside of the textbook, and we fill the gap of what resources are not being taught in the classroom through the work that we're doing with our Central America campaign. You can visit our website at teachingcentralamerica.org. You'll see many different resources that we have there, including resources that celebrate every country in the region. We have resources that you can find by theme, so whether it's Indigenous Central America, if it's resources in Spanish, art, and others. We have lessons that are at our website as well, and we have the lesson on immigration, which is timely as we think about the election and we think about what has been happening the last couple of years as well. You'll see sections on artists, both artists that are historical and modern, and then artists that are contemporary as well. And seeing the beautiful vibrancy of what Central American art and heritage brings to not just Central America, but to all of us. And one of the key pieces that we want to celebrate is that there are educators teaching about Central America. And so you have a couple of pictures that we have here. This is actually from E.L. Haynes Public Charter School. And these are students participating in last year's Teaching Central America Week. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you can see these lessons where students are engaging with poems like in Lakesh, so thinking about language as a way that we are connecting with the Central American region and bringing that heritage and culture to communities. We also have educators who are looking at how do we celebrate Central American historical figures. Do they have monuments? Who has monuments in the ways that we celebrate people, and who deserves a monument, right? And so you can see the ways that teachers are engaging with the history and engaging with young people in their own understanding and context of the work. And one of the things that we love is that we get to bring Central American authors and books to classrooms. And so here you'll see a picture that we, with the great gratitude of one of our advisors and donors, provided the Mario Ben Castro book. And so you can see these young people just celebrating that they received this book as one of the visits. We have just released a new toolkit that will allow for educators and all of us to get a little bit more context on Central America. So you can see some of the slides here of what those toolkits will be, thinking about, can you name the countries that are in the region? What do you think about history and some historical points as well? And what are the, look at the toolkit. I don't want to give it all away. And we wanted to say thank you to our advisors. We have advisors, Marcy, I see you here, and some of our other advisors who have continued to support the work and our efforts. We also want to shout out our staff, so and former or current board members. So if you are a Teaching for Change advisor, staff member, current or former board member, do you mind just raising your hand so we can also shout you out? Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. And one way that you can help is we are launching our first initiative, Giving Day, on October 10th during Teach Central America Week. So Teach Central America Week is October 7th through October 11th of this year. And our goal is to raise $10,000. So if you want to be part of that contribution, you can find one of our staff members that are here, but also just be on the lookout as we will be celebrating and amplifying that Giving Day on October 10th. Oh, that's it.
And quick note that throughout the event, please order food and drinks and show your appreciation to your server when you're paying the bill. And also one of our former board members, Rick Reinhardt, is taking photos. We'll share photos, the album, with everybody. And you can also purchase books. Madison here can help you, and you can get them autographed. Get them as gifts. Get lots of them for our authors. I think that's everything. Thank you. And now we're going to welcome Nancy and the authors to the stage. Oh. And while they're coming up to the stage, does anybody learn anything from your bio? Anyone want to raise their hand? What did you learn as they're coming up to the stage?
Actually, I learned that
Sandino? Oh, Marti. You had Marti, yes.
was the founder of the Communist Party of America. So I have revolutionary, so that was very
Anybody not have a anybody have a counter-revolutionary? Yeah. Yeah. So this activity is, you want to raise, do you want to?
I want to say what I learned. I learned that Nicaragua sent the only Afro-Latino presidential candidate as
Wow. Should we get you a lower chair? We should get you a lower one. Okay, this activity, as you leave, if you could leave your bio at the table, but this activity is for free download at our website, teachingcentralamerica.org. And we're going to get Nancy, or I think we're going to get you a lower chair. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, that feels much better. So this is such a exciting panel, and I feel very, very honored to have been asked to moderate it. So we are joined by Anna Lapera, a Guatemalan American who teaches middle school in Montgomery County. And is the author of Mani Semilla Finds Her Quetzal Voice. And I got a chance to read it, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful book. I got a chance to read most of the books, and they were really just gorgeous. And then next over here, we have Bessie Flores Zaldívar. Welcome. From Tegucigalpa, Honduras, is a fiction professor. I can never say this. Is a Quinnipiac University and author of Libertad. Diana Rojas, a journalist from Connecticut, New Jersey, and Costa Rica, who currently lives in D.C. That is very exciting, and is the author of The Lives of Saints. Oh, yeah, of course. I want to make sure that okay. And then at the end of the panel is John Manuel Arias, a Costa Rican American poet and writer who lives in D.C., yay, Brooklyn, and San Jose. He is the author of Where There Was Fire. So thank you. So one of the things that we're going to do here is just have a conversation. Anybody can jump in. And this is a question for anyone. What inspired you to write your book? Anybody?
I just got to answer this question earlier when Anna asked it to me earlier this week. I wrote Libertad from a place of questions. It's a coming-of-age novel, so it deals with a queer coming-of-age in Tegucigalpa, which is where I queerly came of age, which was very hard and very exciting. And I had a lot of questions about that, like what would my life had been like if I had had queer elders or other people who were queer and out. That wasn't true for me when I was in high school. Or would I choose to immigrate again if I could, knowing what I know now? I've been in the US for 8 years. So I wrote the novel trying to play a little simulation with those questions about my own queer coming of age in Teus.
Anyone want to add? I mean, anyone's conversation? Yeah. Just, what inspired you to write, your book?
Okay. I've always been rather interested in the contextual nature of identity or assimilation or even reinvention. So I wrote this book to create Costa Rican characters with whom I could play God, and I could give them challenges to their desire to break free of the cultural confines, the expectations of who they thought they were supposed to be and who they wanted to be. And this was the first time I was writing fiction because I'd been doing journalism before, so I just kind of layered on the drama and the heartache for funsies and enjoyed it.
And Anna? Yeah.
So for me, something I like to share, and I've shared before with Teaching for Change, is actually this activity that some of you all participated as you walked in. It inspired me to write the book because I got the profile of Berta Cáceres, which I was working on a draft of the novel, and that was like this missing piece, which if you read the book, you'll see why, but it's the main character's connection with, with the region. So there was that moment where I needed like that missing piece, that historical piece. But then also as a teacher, I work mostly with students who have just arrived, middle schoolers who have just arrived to the U.S. So it's their like first experience learning English. And when I took my students to the library, I had a student from El Salvador, a 12-year-old boy, asked me, where are all the books about Central America? So I pulled all the maps and atlases. This was several years ago. And he was like, no, but like, where are the books? And I realized that he meant the stories, right? So I was really inspired to write, Central American stories. And of course, I had to think, well, what's mine? And of course, the first image that came to mind was going back to Guatemala for a family reunion when I was 12. And my Spanish wasn't that good. It's good now, but it wasn't, at the time it was, I spoke mostly Spanglish. And I remember being at the Burger King for the family reunion and standing at the top of a slide, and my second and third cousins like making fun of me and saying things and giving me like tongue twisters to say, and I wasn't getting it right. And I was like sweating, and the only way away from that was going like down the slide into the nasty pool of plastic balls in Burger King. So, that image just came to mind. But also, I wanted to write about the historical piece. I wanted to write about Guatemala, even though my main character is a, Guatemalan, Chinese, Filipino American in the U.S. But for a long time, I felt like, well, can I write about Guatemala? I didn't grow up there, even though I was born there. What does it mean to write about a place if you're not in that place? And so the way I feel like I made it her story was that the main character discovers these secret letters between the mom, who she thinks could not be less feminist, and then who she finds out is a disappeared feminist journalist aunt. And so I realized, well, that is her story, right? Because that is a very Central American story, a girl who finds out these things about her heritage. And so various things, inspired it.
And Don, Manuel?
So from the first sentence to publication, it took 14 years. It's just kind of right. So writers who are working, we're at the 5-year, 6-year, 10-year mark, you're doing great. I believe in you. And when I was in senior year of high school, I was being encouraged to write. And I sat down to write one day, and out from the darkness came the shadow of a woman checking on her daughters. And then all of a sudden there's a crash, and the mother goes running down the stairs. And so I start following this woman, and I start seeing that her face resembles that of my grandmother. And so I get curious more about my grandmother, who's Costa Rican. My father's side of the family is, my father's side of the family is Costa Rican, mother is Uruguayan. So I became curious about my grandmother, about her story. So what did it mean for this character as an individual? And what did it mean for the familial, the communal, and then the national of Costa Rica? And what did that mean for me as a Costa Rican to write this book and explore the life of this woman?
Wow. So one of the things that we would love, and we can start with John Manuel, is to share with us a favorite excerpt of your book. And we'll ask that of everyone, so be ready.
It's me again.
Yeah.
So my novel is told in two different timelines, and they are marked in a very elemental way. So in the past, you have this huge fire, and then in the present day, you have a huge hurricane, which is very fun. And so we're going to start with the hurricane in 1995. An aberrant hurricane arrived on Tuesday morning. Rain swelled and burst from the sky, forcing bright-beaked birds to seek refuge in car mufflers, underneath bromeliad umbrellas, or inside crowded chicken coops. No one in Costa Rica knew exactly when morning had actually begun, because roosters, distracted by the storm or by the bright-beaked invaders, forgot to crow. Vendors tried and failed to open their stands. Beggars filled their empty cups with hail. Politicians stayed secure in the warmth of their canopy beds. The old women who had once danced of rain had indeed been right, as always. But who could remember the last time a hurricane had fluttered its heavy body this far south? It was, until this moment, a highly improbable, physically unlikely scenario, climactically impossible, depending on whom one asked. This was usually thanks to the Coriolis effect, which had saved Costa Rica season after season. Put simply, hurricanes didn't form this close to the equator. Earthquakes? Absolutely. Volcanic eruptions? Like clockwork. But today, to everyone's surprise and groaning dismay, one hurricane had broken all meteorological rules and decided to run amok. Weathermen said that the rebel storm, still nameless, ricocheted like a pinball off every island in the Caribbean. After narrowly missing Panama, it landed on the shores of Costa Rica. It dipped its toes in the warm Atlantic waters to gain momentum and began enveloping the land, as giddy as a tourist on an all-expenses-paid vacation. For hours, the nervous meteorologists on competing channels had been contradicting one another about the duration of the storm. On Canal 6, Eduardo Ganosa, afraid of losing viewers, said it would last just another 45 minutes. Then clear skies and brilliant sunshine for the rest of the week. On Canal 7, the anchor Jorge Gamboa slurred and took shameless gulps from a silver flask. The tempest, he said, would hover over Costa Rica for 100 years and drown the isthmus separating North and South America once and for all. He then exploded into a tirade about the president's corruption and melting Greenlandic icebergs.
Wow.
I'm going to read from a chapter that's taking place on Independence Day, so 15 de septiembre in Tegucigalpa. And there are these huge parades to celebrate Independence Day, but it's 2017, so it's a few months before the presidential election that the book centers on. A Honduran flag stands next to the stage. I stare at its folds, blue and white, as the familiar instrumental music begins. We put our right hands over our hearts and open our mouths to sing the song about a loud ocean striking a naked volcano, and the honor it'd be to die for a land with a name. Serán muchos Honduras tus muertos, pero todos caerán con honor. When it's over, everyone returns to making visors out of their hands to shield their eyes from the sun. The sweat on my face makes my eyes sting. We melt as the schools in front of us kick off the parade and begin to make their way around the track. Trumpets and drums hurt my ears. Despite it being an open field, every inch of air feels precious and finite. Several schools are dressed in trajes típicos, the Honduran traditional robes, now mostly used in patriotic, formal events like this one. I'm unsure of their origin. I remember Abuelo saying it's a mix of colonial influences, but most likely modeled after the clothing of different indigenous groups, like Los Lencas. Boys wear hard cotton fabric pants, mostly white or the color of clay, and a long-sleeved baggy shirt that matches the pants in the same fabric. 3 embroidered ribbons in different bright colors run around the neck and wrists, making it look like they're wearing very long necklaces, and 3 bracelets on each hand. But the boys look simple next to the girls, with their long dresses, with skirts of multiple layers and color. A single skirt can have a blue layer, a red layer, a yellow layer, and more. It's beautiful. No dress is exactly like another. With every other steps the girls take, they hold open the edges of their skirts, like birds' wings in flight. The movement produces the illusion of color waves in the wind. At first, I can't really see Camila. She's too far ahead. I try to stand on my toes, but that doesn't help. I keep bumping into the people in front and behind of me. Finally, after picking around bodies and angled arms between heads and flags, I catch a glimpse of the back of her head. One bent elbow resting on her hips. She's a natural performer. Her hips and the beat locked as one. Sweat slides down my back and all the way down my waistband, making my shirt stick to my skin. Camera flashes blink at us from every angle, making it even harder to see anything. We make it halfway around the track. Someone screams, "Viva Honduras!" and the rest of the crowd yells back, "Viva!" The drums and trumpets are deafening, louder by the second, and the cheers still manage to ascend over them. It's so loud, no one hears the first explosion.
Costa Rica is overrepresented on this stage, so.
For the first time in history.
Ever. I'm going to read to you from the third novella of my triptych. And this is about a man named, I did not know you when I named him, Juan Manuel, who has left Costa Rica many years ago, and he's being called back by his mother because his brother has found himself in political hot water. And that's where I pick up here. 1981. Mi amorcito, your brother needs you. My mother's phone call came in just as I was leaving for work. I had chugged down some coffee, but it hadn't hit yet. My brain was blurry. I was in a rush. They arrested him this morning, she continued. She sounded like she'd been crying. That stopped me. What? Who? Hernan? Pay attention to me, Juan, my mother scolded, her voice becoming urgent and angry. Hernan was arrested. Things are going crazy here. They say he's been hanging out with communists. They killed his friend's girlfriend, Viviana, in her jail cell. You need to come home now. Hernan needs you. Technically, I was home. Chicago, where Candace and I had moved after we got married in Louisville in 1971. She at 22, me 27. Candy was from a long line of Kentuckians for whom the four corners of the world had been limited to Dixie. Her blonde hair and light eyes were as exotic to me as my perennially tanned skin was to her. We had both outgrown Louisville by the 1970s, and Chicago, the big city, beckoned. We jumped into our car with the just married letters still smeared across the back window and set off for the 6-hour ride north, looking for more space to spread our wings and find ourselves. Sorry. I'm so sorry. We found a nice apartment in Pilsen, disguising ourselves among the influx of Mexicans settling into the neighborhood of longtime Eastern European residents. In Pilsen, I did find myself in the faces of other Central Americans who'd call me John, but pronounce it John. Speak English, y'all, Candy would say sweetly at first with a smile. Later, it became a little more forceful. Speak English, John, I don't understand you. Finally, it became an angry murmur. God damn it, speak English, y'all, this is America. We didn't last the whole of 6 years, despite our still professed love. I just don't fit into your world, Candy said to me the day she hightailed it back to Louisville. She wore a Mexican blouse with flowers embroidered in riotous colors, a parting gift from our neighbor, Juanita. I didn't stop her because I couldn't define my world with thick lines. I was an immigrant. I was an American. I was neither here nor there. I could be everywhere. And yet there I was, nearly 4 years later, home in the same small 2-bedroom house that Candy and I had bought from an octogenarian Polish couple the year before we split. The neighborhood was increasingly Mexican. As a Costa Rican who had adopted an Anglo name and a navy blue passport when bell-bottoms were in high style, I was comfortable enough straddling the shifting demographic ground. The Mexicans didn't exactly claim me, neither did the white Americans, but I felt I belonged. Come home as quickly as you can, my mother urged before she hung up.
I have to say, you all chose some of my favorite parts in all 3 books. I'm so happy you read that. So I'm going to read from close to the beginning of the book, but it's helpful just to give a quick recap. So it's upper middle grade. That means, ages like 11 to 15. And it's about a 12-year-old girl, Manny Semilla, who she really wants 2 things in life. She's obsessed with getting her period and also thwarting her mom's plan of taking her to Guatemala by her 13th birthday. But then one day she discovers these secret letters between her mom and who turns out to be, a disappeared feminist journalist aunt, her tia Beatriz, who she always just heard died in a bus crash. But through the discovery of the letters, she learns not only about a family secret, but also about Guatemalan history. And what happens is that it ends up kind of helping her make sense of what she sees as this culture of harassment and rampant groping and harassment in her American middle school. So I'm reading toward kind of from the beginning where she's being called out in class. But you can't tell me any of this because I'm 12 and life sucks when you're 12. You're not a little kid, but you're also not an adult. And all the grown-ups in your life talk about your body the minute it starts getting a shape. And what sucks even more than being a half Chinese, Filipino American, half Guatemalan who can't speak any ancestral language well, when almost every other girl in school has already gotten her period, except for you and your two besties, Kai and Connie. And everybody's looking at you like you're still some little girl with no real life knowledge to go with those big, stupid purple frame glasses. Glasses that have been bigger than my face ever since I was 8 and first started wearing them, because I'm myopic, which is a fancy way of saying things look blurry in the distance. Sometimes I wish a big, ugly meteor would come down and destroy my glasses so I could get new ones, like those clear framed ones, the kind that would make me look like a grown woman, like a writer. But not gonna happen, because mommy picked my glasses, on rebaja, of course, because paying full prices for rich folks and pendejos, and we are neither. I mean, I know she's trying. Mommy picked the color too, after her favorite bird, the quetzal, which is the national bird of Guatemala. Manuela, the most beautiful and rare quetzal birds of all have a purple sheen, she said the day she got them. That is if you're lucky enough to see a quetzal, which is almost no one. But still, I think I'd have more luck spotting a real-life quetzal or rolling my R's better than abuelita than getting out of yet another ridiculous homework assignment. Manuela, you're up, says Mr. Jones, who teaches first period health and never says my name right. My cousin Cece told me that mispronouncing someone's name is an attack on their alma. And she's real smart and goes to college and said words like self-sustaining, consent, and Latinx, so it's gotta be true. Not to mention, she can switch between English and Spanish so smooth, like that first Takis dusting on your fingers 3 seconds after you open a new bag and no one else's hands have been in it. Manuela, you must not have heard me, he says. Except I did. I just didn't do this stupid homework. Who gives 7th graders an assignment to describe their ideal partner? Really? Who, me? I point to myself and turn around, even though I'm in the last row. All I see are healthy relationship posters the Quarter 3 Health Kids made for Valentine's Day competition a few months ago, except they look like they cut and glued them together with their teeth or something. Ania from the 3rd row picks off her nail polish, turns around and side-eyes me. I try to do it back, but she's like 12,000 times closer to becoming a woman than I am. I mean, she started wearing a real bra in 4th grade, and she can recite the Spanish alphabet backward, so there's that. She turns her head back toward the front of the class, sneaks out her phone, and checks her teeth on the reflection of the home screen. Must be nice to get to have boobs and a phone. Manny, Kai whispers, all concerned every other sentence like mommy. But I don't want to go up there, even though my abuelita says that I need to find my quetzal voice. Except I don't really know what that means. Manuela, be a quetzal like your tia Beatriz, she says on the days she has her memory, but also on the days she doesn't. What she means is be like her other daughter, mommy's sister, apparently a real quetzal of a woman who got on a bus one day in Guatemala and never came home.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. One of the questions that I'd like to ask is, besides yourselves, who are some writers, and we can start with Anna, we'll go the other way again. Who are some writers, Central American writers, that you feel we should know?
Well, when I first read the question, I missed the part of besides ourselves, so clearly I would encourage everyone to buy all of their books. I know we have 2 adult fiction writers, so I'm going to stick more with the kidlit world. Some that I would recommend, one of which I have not read, but I'm really excited about the premise. The first one is by Kat Fajardo. It's a graphic novel. It's by a Honduran Colombian writer and artist. And their book is Mis Quinces, and it's about a girl that is and I haven't finished it yet actually, but it's about her looming like quinceañera and trip to Honduras. And so I just love that it's a graphic novel because of course for students, that's, especially for reluctant readers, that's a really great gateway into reading. And the next one is by a Panamanian author called, named Tamika Burgess. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, but her book is about to come out. Danilo Was Here, and it's a historical fiction about a boy. It's a coming-of-age story about a boy during the 1989 U.S. invasion of Panama, and he has an opportunity to go to the U.S., but of course, thinking about what that means amid the invasion of his country kind of, you know, changes all that. So I think I'm just so excited for that book to come out. So that's called Danilo Was Here.
So I'm going to stick to Costa Rican writers because every now and then I assuage my guilt at being the generation that broke the chain of Costa Ricans since the founding. And I read a Costa Rican novel that's been recommended to me. So I'm going to put first on this list is Asalto al Paraíso, Assault on Paradise by Tatiana Lobo. It's just wonderful. For those of you who like historical fiction, I mean, this has fleeing from the Inquisition, it's got conquistadors, it's got gold, it's got everything. It's pretty wonderful, and the language is gorgeous. Second, for those of us who like feminist lit, like Kate Chopin or Virginia Woolf, there's Julieta Pinto's collection of short stories, Si se oyera el silencio, if you could hear the silence. It's really wonderful. It's quiet and deep. Yes, isn't that beautiful, right? And then for those of us who like social causes, like Upton Sinclair's The Jungle or John Steinbeck, I'm gonna recommend the perennial favorite, Carlos Luis Fallas and Mamita Junay and Gentes y Gentecillas, but he has a lot of other ones, so just pick any one by him.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
The first person I want to recommend is Edgar Gomez, who's a Nicaraguan Puerto Rican writer. His memoir, High Risk Homosexual, which is the best title I've ever heard, has been out for a few years and it's incredible. But he has a new book coming out called Alligator Tears next year that everyone should pre-order. Edgar is an amazing writer, and the ways he explores queerness and how it interacts with his racial identity is just incredible. But I have been also thinking recently about the poets I grew up reading in Spanish class in Honduras. And today I was thinking about Clementina Suarez, which is the first Honduran woman who ever had a poetry book published, and that wasn't that long ago. And she was great. I remember reading her in school, and also Juana Pavón, who I mentioned in my book, and is the epigraph of my book, is a quote by Juana Pavón, Tegucigalpa, de noche y de día, como me dueles toda. The first time I interacted with her work, she was outside a bar, very, very drunk, just reciting her poetry. And people would call her Juana la Loca, which was really, really sad and really shitty. You would often find her drunk reciting poetry. And it's very hard to find the books, like the collected works, because no one really dedicated themselves to doing the work of putting it together. But you can find bits and pieces in the internet. She died a few years ago, but I think of that poet often, and I think she was just so ahead of her time. She was writing really feminist poetry in like late 1990s in Honduras, which is crazy.
I was gonna do like you, Anna. You have the great setup right there.
You have to be shorter, so
I know.
pull that off.
We'll try it, no. So I was also thinking about Costa Ricans, mostly because there are two of us on this stage writing in English. There are so many more in Spanish, and there are so few translations. So if I can just say a couple of names, maybe that can inspire anybody who's a translator to do a little research and to go to Costa Rica. The first, of course, is Carmen Lira, who was a children's book writer, but also wrote a really fantastic book of short stories called Bananos y Hombres. So my book has a lot to do with the banana companies in Central America and in Costa Rica. Carmen Lira was the co-founder of the Communist Party, and she also participated in many of the protests against the United Fruit Company. The book of short stories is fantastic, and Carmen Lira is just a wonder and a national treasure. The second would be Quince Duncan, who is the first Afro-Costa Rican writer to be writing in Spanish. His work is fabulous. He's a older generation, and his stuff is so modern, it is so bananas and wild. And the third, actually, who writes in English, her name is Ari Tyson, and she's a wonderful human being. She's actually Bree American. So Bree is an indigenous group in Costa Rica, and she just had a book come out last year called Saints of the Household. And it is YA, novel in verse, two Bree brothers in the Midwest. It'll blow you away.
Yes. So thank you for that. That was really amazing. Now we'd like to hear from the audience. So we're asking that you ask us short questions, and we'll call on as many of you as possible. So is there anyone who has a question for our panelists? Right over here. Okay.
My name is Roland Roebuck, and very glad to hear all these lovely experiences. I'm interested in understanding your writing setup. In other words, how is your environment in which you conduct all this creative work? That's number one. And number two, I want to say thank you for including an Afro-Latino writer, since many of our Afro-Latinos seldom have the space to present their work. So, Costa Rica, I thank you. And I also been to Limon, so I'm also interested in seeing more work coming out from that area. But describe each one of you. Describe your writing setup. Do you have music? Are you eating chicharrones? What is it? You drinking exotic wine? What is it that you do in order to create this wonderful work?
I love that question. I'll start because mine is probably the least exotic of all, because I have a 1-year-old and a 7-year-old. So I'm usually writing over like snack leftovers and lunch trays that I just don't have the ganas to like wash like as soon as they come home. So I'm like, so mine is really, I love writing in the kitchen. So I'll just find like a little space in the kitchen. It usually involves coffee, and usually coffee with a lid because I spill things often. And so that's mine. Ideally, it would be a coffee shop. I know that's very cliche, but in reality, it's just a little space in the kitchen.
Mine's going to make me sound a little crazy. I take really long walks, and I talk to myself a lot. I work out. Like, I meet all my characters in my head, and then we have arguments, and I'm like, no, that can't happen. Yes, that can happen. And then I come home, and I transcribe it all. So I'm not crazy, though. I really am not. I have a vivid imagination.
That's your journalist. yeah, that's a journalist in you.
I like to wake up at 4 a.m. Yeah, which it's the only time it feels like it's quiet enough for me to write. As soon as I can hear the kids across the street getting ready to go to school and the bus come, I'm like, the day is over. I did not write today. So like 4 to 8 a.m. is my perfect writing time. And if I feel stuck, I do usually go on a long, long walk. I say that I do a lot of my writing in my body. That feels like if I can't figure out what happens next, I can walk to figure it out and talk and check in with my characters. It sucks when they tell you things you don't want to hear. Yeah. You're like, no, that's so cruel. I've also recently learned that boxing really helps me write. If I box halfway through the day, I can write at night. Before, I didn't think it was possible to write after 9 a.m. tops. Now I'm feeling like I can do it at night a little bit more. That's mine.
That's awesome.
And you can kick somebody's ass, which is always handy. 4 a.m. just made me really tired. I wake up around 7. I am a morning writer because I need my coffee. I need the caffeine to, it's not even a jolt, it's like a steady, a lift up, right? It's bliss, it's nice. And it also gives me the chance to achieve something in the day. It's my little ritual of making my coffee. It's a little ritual of feeding my cat, and then I sit down at my desk and I'm able to do something more. And I'm only good for about 2 or 3 hours of writing, and then I'm useless the rest of the day, which is why it took me 14 years.
So mine is more of a comment, but hopefully you can provide your reaction. I was fortunate enough to attend book presentations for at least 2 of you on stage. Really excited to see you guys here again. But in those conversations that came up, why as a Latin American did you choose to write in English or in Spanish? As a reader, as a writer, I've been processing that question a lot, and I think it's come down to this. It comes down to, one, what is your literary voice? For me, when I write, I often write in Spanish because I may think in English, but I dream in Spanish. And then 2, I think you have to write in the language that your characters speak to you. So if your characters are speaking to you in English or in Spanish or Filipino, that's what you're gonna write. That's what you're gonna put on the page. So just curious to hear what your reactions and how you resolve that, that imbalance as a Latinx, as a Latina or diaspora person. Thank you.
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. Oh, go ahead. I'm not sure. That's a great question. And I didn't actually have to think about it that much because English is my dominant language. I was born in the United States, and I did go to school in Costa Rica for a little bit. But because my schooling there ended in 8th grade, my Spanish is 8th grade level.
Okay, cool. I write in English because I'm good at it. I am not good at writing Spanish. I don't have that command. I think the musicality, I'm originally a poet, and so I write and I look at the sonic level, right? I look down at the cells, and what do those cells sound like when they vibrate? And they vibrate in English, unfortunately. So ancestors who visited me in my dreams, trying to monologue and say, hey, put me in this book. They did it in Spanish, but too bad you're in English.
I disagree with you. So I grew up speaking Spanish. My whole family speaks Spanish. But in Honduras, I did have to speak English all day at school. And there were a lot of systems that made sure we didn't steer away from that. We spoke Spanish 1 hour a day during Spanish class. And then math and everything else was in English. Yeah. And the characters speak to me in Spanish. And I almost feel like I've been thinking a lot about why I didn't just write this book in Spanish. Part of it is what you say, that my training creatively is in creative writing in English. It feels like the art part of how it sounds, I could only get it right in English. But I also think that I was a little scared to write it in Spanish because this is a book that's so political and dealing with a lot of events that are still taking place right now. I have a lot of people message me and be like, when is this book gonna be available in Honduras? The truth is that I don't know and don't think the ministry that makes decisions about what books get in and get sold in the country would approve this right now. And I think that I wanted to give myself, maybe without knowing so, a little bit of a shield. And writing it in English was my way to give myself that shield, aware that my whole family still lives in Honduras.
Yeah. Sorry, asking a follow-up question. Bessie, do you think you'll ever write a book in Spanish?
Yes, I think so, but a part of me thinks that for that to be possible, my family would have to all live here first.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did want to say what I love about Libertad is that you have like chunks of poetry that you did not translate into English. Like they are in Spanish, like big chunks of the poem. So I think that was really cool. I hadn't seen that.
Thank you. It was a little gift.
Yeah.
Buenas noches. My name is Gustavo, and I am a writer from LA, and I came here from the airport because I wanted to see these new Central American voices. And it doesn't seem like you're new at all, so I'm you know, sometimes people discover us later, right? I thought that when Rolando asked, my Boricua brother over there asked about environment, I thought he was going to talk a little bit about like the locality that you write from or your characters are in, because Latinidad is situational and relational, and so is Central American identity. And for me, it's fascinating to hear people writing about places other than LA and San Francisco. So could you talk a little bit more about that and how your characters and your writing is situated in wherever you're writing from?
Thank you for the question. Someone get this man a drink for coming from all the way from LA. So environment is huge in all of Central America, right? But as a Costa Rican, it is sold as this paradise. It is pura vida. It is 5% of the world's biodiversity. It is beaches and monkeys and all of these things, and literature does not exist, right? I wanted to fight against that by, you know, there was a period where I wanted to deny the environment. I wanted to deny that inkling to play to an American imagination of green and beach and all of these things. But then I realized our people interact with the land on their own. This environment exists with them. It is not a setting, it is home. And so to be able to write about Costa Rica's nature, about its climate, about climate change, which is incredibly important because developing countries feel it first. Costa Rica has had the most floodings than it has ever had this year, right, in its history. So having the environment and having the weather and the climate was it was integral to the work.
Do you want to go? Okay. Thank you so much for that question. It's so exciting to answer it. I grew up in Teus, and that is the place I'm writing from, but I've been thinking about this today, how there's this study that just came out in the Journal of Latin American and Caribbean Studies about people who came of age in Honduras during the coup of 2009, people who were coming of age during the coup. I was 12 when it happened. My character was also coming of age when it happened. And how people who experienced that as they were young have a completely different political mentality than everyone else in the country. And now reading that book, knowing that I can really tell, it's a defiance and also an awareness that being young is perceived as a danger in Honduras, that you are someone who is considered to be a risk because you're young. And this being a coming of age novel, I think was really trying to capture that. Over 50% of the population is under 25 years old in Honduras. The median age is 23, so it's a very young people's country. That's the space I'm writing from here.
Unlike John, I was also writing. I also very consciously thought of the way Costa Rica is perceived as a paradise. And I deliberately, you'll find no leaves in my story, no beaches, no leaves. And the reason there is none is because I wanted to write from that, I call it the immigrant amber, where you take the memory of the past and you make it perfect. You make it shiny and you trap it in amber, and whenever you're stressed, you kind of rub that stone, and that's your happy place, your good place, but it's not a real place. So all of my immigrants remember it fondly, remember something else, and then have to come to terms with the person they want to become, which is not necessarily the person that they were. So I had this experience at a reading where the son of one of my cousins came, and the thing I feared the most was that somebody would say to me, "What right do you have writing about Costa Rica? You are not really Costa Rican, you're American." And that's a true statement. I am American. And he said to me, he said, you know, everybody had left, and he comes in sotto voce, he says, "Well, Diana, you made Costa Rica look bad." And honestly, I almost started crying because that was never my intention. And then it occurred to me, I guess even Costa Ricans are used to their country only being portrayed as a paradise. And I did not make the country look bad, by the way, just saying.
Thank you. I really, really love that question. For me, just two quick things that come up. I've always loved place-based stories, so where, you know, the setting, the place really comes to life. It's like its own character. But I always felt like because I grew up in so many different places, like I couldn't write a place-based story. And I never saw, like, where, at this point where I've spent most of my life, like Montgomery County, Maryland, I never saw it as you know, of course, when I was younger, a teen, I didn't see it as this interesting place. But then when I was starting to write this book, even though I never named the place, it is based on, you know, on Maryland, on this area. And I was like, there's so many Central Americans in this area. And then also people with my experience that have, you know, mixed Central American heritage. And they're either, you know, first generation in that they were born there but then grew up here, or second generation, third generation. So there's this like really big diversity of Central American experience in this, just in this area. And the other thing is I really wanted to write about Guatemala, but growing up, it was also a place that I really feared as well, right? You always hear about really violent things. And I remember at one point, and this is a big part of the book, especially Tia Beatrice's story, I remember at one point when I realized, like, wow, every single person I know knows someone who has disappeared. You will not meet anyone who was not impacted, like, by the Civil War, especially in that way. But then through the letters, you know, at first I wanted the character to be like, of course I don't want to go here. Like, women are getting killed left and right. But then, you know, as you read on, she also discovers this really beautiful side, and how Guatemala and the like feminist movements there, it's a thing to study now, you know, and so I wanted to kind of like show that relationship that I think kids of diaspora have, where, you see the country as this very nuanced place where bad things happen, but also where there's really like powerful examples and like positive examples. Yeah.
Thank you all. What do you hope young people in the field of education will take away from the stories you tell?
I can start with that. So one thing I've been thinking a lot about this a lot recently is I wanted to write a book that was a Central American story, but not just about immigration, because there's a lot of really wonderful books out there about immigration. But I also wanted to make the point, especially for young readers of all background, that we're more than an immigration narrative, and that even in the immigration narrative, because of course, my book, that is a part of it, you find out why part of her family moves, but that we have so many more stories within that narrative as well.
I think what I would love if young people read my book is for them to realize that they're not the stereotype, they're not the cultural expectation. They can be whoever they want to be. They're not trapped in this cage, even though society, or sometimes even their own family, sticks them in there and says, now, sit pretty. You can get out.
I was surprised that high school teachers have been reaching out to me and saying that they're putting this on their curriculum.
That's awesome.
And this is about the banana companies. This is about U.S. foreign interest in agribusiness and pesticides. Radicalize these kids now. Make them question, make them look at a banana and say, what did this cost? Right? It's awesome.
I had a lot of control over this book, like the cover and everything, but there's one thing I didn't pick, and it's the quote in the back that says, "What does it mean to love a country that doesn't love you back?" And I felt very icky about it first. I was like, I don't want people to think that's what I'm trying to say, but I think it was the right call, because what I want young readers to get out of this book is that you can create a stateless love for a geography and for a people that is in no way attached to any man-made borders. And that's radicalize those kids now. That's what I want them to get out of the book.
Okay, wait.
I understand. So when I asked the question about place, I also was curious about like places in the United States that your characters might be in. And I was also curious how they would relate to other Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, whatever we're calling ourselves this month. Because I think, as I was saying earlier, LA has a different population than San Francisco, than Chicago, than Miami or DC, and New York. So I was just curious if you all could go a little bit into that, or if it's not in your books, like what's your experience with that?
So that does actually come up a lot in my books. My character has a main friend group called Las Nerdas, and they're just like the ultimate misfits in school. And they all have a Latinx background. And there's a moment later on in the book where where my main character Manny also finds out a little bit about the background of her friends. And one of the friends, Genesis, who's from Honduras, she has a close connection with, with Honduran history and Berta Cáceres, the environmental activist. And so her friend group, which are of, different Latinx background from her, they kind of help her fill in those pieces, that it's not this like singular Guatemalan story, but it's kind of a regional one.
I was so uninterested in the United States when I was writing this book. I was so interested in Costa Rica. I wanted to stay there. I wanted the characters to stay there. The only time the US comes up is actually DC. The main character exiles herself here for 6 years, and she feels that it's a swamp where politicians and their aides come and pay handsomely for their sins. That's all I wanted. I wanted the US to be a purgatory. I didn't want it to be a heaven nor a hell, because that would be putting too much focus on it, right?
Yeah, I feel the same way you do. The US never appears in the book. It is always referenced, like this looming empire that people go to, and sometimes you hear from them, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. But I felt deeply uninterested in the US when I wrote this, so it just doesn't really come up as a place the characters ever reach.
I'm an East Coast snob. I was born and raised here. I couldn't write about West Coast Latinos if you paid me, really, because I imagine the experience is different. So for two of the novellas, I placed the characters when they're in the United States in the area I grew up, which is New England. So they're in Connecticut and they're outside of Boston. And then I wrote about Kentucky and about my character going to Kentucky and his grandfather going to Kentucky, and then Chicago after that, because I actually had relatives who emigrated from Costa Rica to Kentucky, and I thought that was the weirdest thing, because they did it in the 40s, and they settled there, and as an East Coast snob, I was like, who lives in Kentucky? So I did some research about their lives there and why they went there, and I thought, oh yeah, I'm gonna do Kentucky. It was a little bit random, but the characters talk to me when I walk, and so we can just go crazy. That's what they told me, yeah.
So I think that's it, right? So, can we have a round of applause? A round of applause for this wonderful, wonderful conversation. As a professor in this is the title of the program, the U.S. Latino Studies Department, I can't tell you how excited I am to be here with you and to share your work with everyone. It really was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. We also are going to allow some time for book signing. The books are right here. So make sure to get your copy, and we'll have the authors sign them. But first, I want to thank you for joining the first event in our Beyond Heroes and Holiday Series, held once a month at one of the Busboys and Poets locations. We will feature authors, scholars, people's historians, films, and peers on social justice education and fugitive pedagogy. Join us Wednesday, October 30th, here at the Brooklyn location for the launch of Teaching for Change, second edition of Putting the Movement Back into Civil Rights Teaching. And you can register, yes. And you can register with the QR code, which is at your table. Again, our thanks to the authors for taking the time to share their work, to the staff at Busboys and Poets, in particular the servers this evening, yes. Thank you. And of course, all of you for joining us this evening. So that's it.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.